Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Word. I'm Kelly Scott Reed, host of said A Word. I'm here today with Aymon Langlois, a disabled award-winning writer, scholar activist, educator, and consultant. His writing has appeared in Jake, the anti-literary magazine, Love You, Jake, Evening Street Review, and Word Gathering, a journal of disability poetry and literature. His debut essay collection, Ugly Feet, OCD, and Other Intimations of Resistance, a narrative suite on disability and masculinity, is out now on Anxiety Press. Welcome, Aymon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you coming to us from?
I am coming to you from lovely Worcester, Massachusetts. Yeah, lovely Worcester, Massachusetts.
I'm super psyched we're on the same time zone because it made it a lot easier to schedule.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Eastern time all the way.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, I got a chance to read Ugly. I'm just going to say Ugly Feet, not the whole
Yeah,
title.
no,
We will put that
absolutely.
in the in our story and show note stuff. But I read it and I was saying to you before we came on how universally, first of all, interesting, informative, well written it is, and the concepts it brings up are timely. Um, and it kind of incorporates this both physical, spiritual, and emotional kind of thoughtfulness and deep dive. Tell us a little bit about Ugly Feet.
Well, thank you, first of all. That's all very, very kind. Yeah, a little bit about Ugly Feet. So this book originated as I'm recently myself out of my undergrad program at Skidmore College. And I majored in English. I had built a sort of reputation for being a disembodied literary critic. And the summer before my senior year, I was slated to write a senior thesis, very much in the sort of academic, theoretical, again, sort of disembodied mode. And I'd had some experiences the year past that I wanted to, I guess and I can talk more about them at length, but there's this other author whom I really admire. Their name's Eli Clare, and they write a book called Brilliant Imperfection, where they basically do a bunch of different stuff, but basically a big part of their project is basically understanding experience in terms of theoretical frameworks. And so I wanted to, having studied disability theory, I wanted to sort of take those sort of frameworks and apply them to experiences I'd had um, throughout my life. And yeah, it was a form that creative nonfiction, as sort of the basic form, I had no experience with whatsoever. So it was sort of I don't know, a brazen decision to venture into the wilds of narrative nonfiction. But it just was so rewarding to sort of take these two parts of myself, both sort of the academic intellectual mode for which I have a tremendous love of, and then also sort of these experiences from my life that I also wanted to sort of talk about.
Well, that being said, what was the most surprising thing you learned about yourself while put while both writing the stories and compiling the essays in the book?
Mm, that's a good question. Most surprising thing. I would say so. It's funny because I talk about the book this way a lot, but I think the first essay, which talks a lot about sort of the connection between disability, masculinity, athleticism, and then the second essay, which talks about sort of disability in academia, have um, well, interestingly, the first essay is very much me trying to sort of find my way into the work. It's very much sort of posing questions that don't necessarily get answered. Then that second essay is very much, I would say at least formally, the most comfortable for me. It takes the most sort of activist stance, I think, of the three pieces.
Mhm.
It sort of rails against ableism and all that good stuff. I think the most surprising thing for me happened in the third essay, as somebody who has never written, um, who as like a young angsty teenager wanted to write music, but was pretty much garbage at it. Um, it was really interesting to find a sort of lyrical mode that I could sort of work within and felt natural to me. I think that was a really cool experience, and I think for sheer reason of its lyricality, one of the essays that I'm proudest of from this collection.
It's so funny you're saying this because my next question is music makes its way into your essays. It's the first thing I noticed. Like each one will have like a lyric or mention a song or somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and I was going to ask, what influence does your musical taste make on your style of writing?
Mm,
Is there someone that even when you're not writing lyrically, you're writing in their style? Like for example, I would say um, the writing style of the Smiths is Oscar Wilde,
mm-hmm.
or but in like but it just say just in a reverse, like there are literary influences on both directions.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're speaking my language because music is such a huge part of my life, always has been. So, yeah, one of my favorite things has always been infusing my writing with lyrics that I love that I feel connect and add to sort of the value of a piece. I would say there are a number of influences. Obviously, there are some like direct influences in sort of who I quote and the connections that I
Mhm.
make. I think that I have always been, as far as music goes, I've always been a lover of, and people get really on me when I say this. I really love country music, but not like the beers, trucks, misogyny kind. Like I very much am like I'm very much all about storytelling, obviously. And so I think somebody like well, I mean it sounds cliche, but it's just true. I mean, she's phenomenal, like Taylor Swift. Um,
Mhm.
she has always been a huge and in fact, in writing sort of the opening of that third essay, the lyricality of sort of um, detailing the first months of a relationship and sort of the magic that exists there, I very much was sort of, well, it's funny because that essay begins the fall that her re-recording of Red came out. And so not
Mhm.
only am I sort of as a writer writing an essay thinking about that record, I'm also a character in that essay, like that being the soundtrack of those moments.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I think Taylor shows up in there, influence wise. There's also a line in that essay, that I'm pretty sure I basically just stole from Louis Capaldi, sort of wittingly. It was just sitting in my head and then it was suddenly on the page. And, so yeah, no, yeah, I think there's a bunch of influences and my tastes are far flung. So,
Nice, very cool. Music is my thing too. thing I love to talk about the most. So when I see that in someone's writing, I go, ooh, I get to talk about music for 5 minutes again. That's
Absolutely,
awesome.
absolutely.
Um, what's the most helpful criticism that you've received as a writer?
Mm, that's a really good question. Oh, you're hitting me with all the good ones. Most helpful criticism. I That's a really good question. I think one of okay, so I'm gonna spin that a little bit and say the criticism that is sort of stuck with me the most. And I think in turn that I find myself thinking about a lot. So it sort of has found its way into a lot of my writing. Is I had a mentor who sort of it's hard to, I think, work with other people that sort of have a very specific view of what writing is, of what writing can be, when those two people have very sort of different views of what writing is and what writing can be. And I had this mentor, and he was very much invested in brevity. And I am a lover of ornate Victorian literature, and often find myself, at least at the sentence level, writing that way. Um, and on a number of occasions, he basically said to me, like, you have to, there's a place for concision in your writing. And I push back against that, and I push back against that, and I push back against that. Um, and I think over some years, I've found myself, I don't know, I still love ornate sentences with dashes and commas and clauses and what have you, but there are sentences that I think are best written in a concise way that pack a punch. And I think, interestingly, in a broader sense, while I tend to sort of gravitate to the more ornate on the sentence level, I think one of the things that I think I count as one of my strengths that I'm not sure is always counted as a strength, but I think I really enjoy um, composing a absolutely like just tight argument. And so I think that in many ways, sort of my essays as a whole have become very concise, and sort of no moment is sort of I don't like to like include anything that's not supposed to be there, that doesn't serve a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting because I think with that always in mind,
Hmm.
so my husband's really verbose, like really verbose, more so than I am. And sometimes he'll be telling me something
Mm.
and I'll be like, stop, shorten. I don't need all that detail. However, there are times when the storytelling requires it
Hmm. Hmm.
and the more verbose. And he is one of the best storytellers. He will have you in stitches. People are just crying listening to him tell a story because he
Hmm.
gets the right details. And I
Yeah.
think that that's where you're coming from with this particular work that I was reading because I didn't think you were verbose at all. As a matter of fact, I have trouble with I have trouble. I have ADHD, so I when I start reading something, my brain will just. But if it keeps me in the moment, and I think you had just enough detail, enough real feeling
Hmm.
that you didn't go over that line where it was just for the sake of saying the detail or the sound of it, which is there's a place for that.
No,
But in some work, you want to hear the story pretty clearly,
mhm.
especially the ones that you're telling, which are very important, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, I mean, not to sort of harp on this, but I think that particular moment in that particular essay where I'm feeling like my most Taylor Swift self. Feels like um feels like sort of the most I don't know. It feels like that moment is for me, I think, more than anybody else. But I think that for me, because that essay ends up being about sort of the disillusion of a relationship and sort of how tough that can be, I needed a moment for myself to remember, like, when this was good, it was really good. And so, yeah, I think it's all about picking the right details, and sometimes picking the right details looks different. A lot of the times as writers, it's about, like picking the details that are going to matter to the consumer. Um, but I think also, our writing also should first and foremost matter to us. And so, um, picking those details out too, I think is important.
What does literary success look like to you?
Mm. Um, it's funny. So in preparation for talking, I was going through a number of sort of the interviews that you've done, and I'm gonna totally blank on his name, but I watched an interview where you asked the very same question, and I think I'm gonna um basically
Ooh, let me see if I can remember who said it. I doubt it, but I'll try.
um it's okay. So his name, I think his name's Joseph.
Joe Leza?
Yes.
L-E.
Yes.
Yes. Boy, this will be like the fifth time I've mentioned him. I mentioned him in an interview prior. I absolutely, yeah, he's lovely. He's
Yeah, he
awesome.
seems like such a nice guy. I wanna somehow find a way to connect with him. But
Yeah.
yeah, he said something about basically this idea that if my work touches one other person, um I will that will be literary success. And I think that's so profoundly true. I mean, I'm somebody who doesn't really have I don't really have any sort of commercial sight of sort of what my writing could be. I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say it's not like cool that like this thing that I enjoy doing, I'm able to, make some money here and there off it. It certainly, is nice. But I have a day job. And so really the writing for me is about getting ideas that are really important to me, getting them out there um, into the sort of the cultural imaginary more than they already are. And yeah, so even if one person picks it up, which I'm thrilled to hear that it sounds like it has, to land for one or more people is just the coolest experience. And then I think the way that you sort of like the way for me that I think I am most fulfilled by sort of that happening is then being in conversation with people, not about necessarily the like, because I've already said what I have to say about these experiences that I've had in my life. So not necessarily talking about those experiences more, but basically just talking about the bigger ideas, the way that sort of disability, masculinity function in our society. And yeah, I just think that's the coolest thing.
I really so appreciate you taking this time with me today. This has been really a great conversation. Um, where can we find your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So my book, first and foremost, it's linked on my website, Aymon E Langlois, all one word, .com. And yeah, there should be a link there. If my web design is up to par, there should be a link there to purchase it. So thank
Awesome. Well,
you.
we'll put that in the show notes and everything on the video so people will be able to just click the link and get to the site.
Great. Well, thank you so much
Awesome.
for having me.
It was awesome talking to you. Thank you so much. Really, truly great stuff. It was great to meet you, Eamon. We'll talk again soon, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. Good to meet you too.